Sego sewaguego, wagadewe ensto ne kanyenkeha genioseres, yodahetsto. Tano nuwa, ak gwene, agiron ostuha kanyenkeha, tano angetnigo hrayantane, ostuha ok, oni. Negadi nuwa, igere aguahrori, ostuha aorihwake ne ti. Hello there, all of yous. I have studied the Mohawk language throughout the last year, and now I can speak a little bit of it, and I can understand a little bit as well. So today I want to talk to you a little bit about it. Guahundole agadewenste ne kanyenkeha, azega agua igonji anglophone ne ii, dano ezo degetstiha ne kanyenkeha geniot ne otsurunikeha. It's quite difficult for me to study Mohawk because I am very much an Anglophone, and Mohawk and English are a great deal different from one another. Ya ezo de geweyande ji kanyenkeha. Nekji ikere ji ayo yanaleke akadewenste dogat anda gadaweyando aguarihunyani ostuha jinahoda gendere. I'm not much use with the Mohawk language, but I think it would be good practice for me to do my best to teach you a little bit of what I know. Negadi aundire wadasawa. So let's start. That was a little bit tedious to produce there. It's hard enough to think in the Mohawk language, but it's harder when you have to switch back and forth every sentence. So I'm just going to do the rest of this in English. The Mohawk language is completely different to the English language. It's got basically nothing in common with it. Right down to the shape and structure of a word, even the phonemes available. You might have noticed that the spelling of a lot of Mohawk words is just kind of whack. This is because the French people who came up with the orthography were trying to capture the subtlety of how the phonemes were pronounced differently. The R in this word is pronounced more like an L, but it's not written as an L because it's not pronounced like an L. The sound isn't meant to be made by pushing your tongue against the front of your mouth like with an L, with this sort of soft, wet sound. It's meant to be produced more like a Scottish R, ariter, only with a slightly less pronounced roll. This is the origin of a lot of the bizarre spelling. Certain elements of it have changed or stayed the same or improved over time as various orthographers have sort of expressed their opinions on the subject. Modern-day Akwesasne orthography is different from modern-day Six Nations orthography, both of which are different from the original French orthography. One example some of you might be familiar with is in old documents, French spelling of Wendat is often with an O rather than a W. This is because the Iroquoian W sound is pronounced differently from the English W sound. In English, when we say the W sound, Wendat, we say it with the front of our mouth, a certain amount of lip movement. The way it's supposed to be pronounced is with the back of your mouth with very little lip movement, Wendat. Subtle differences which don't always matter that much. A lot of these differences in the phonemes, the little bits that make up syllables, come from the way that you hold your mouth when you're speaking Mohawk. When someone's speaking the Mohawk language, the lips never meet. The lips don't move very much at all. It would be a bloody good language for a ventriloquist. Mouth position seems kind of arbitrary on the surface of it when you think about learning a language, but it's sort of key to how words are actually pronounced, not just in terms of like accent, but in terms of actually saying the words. Mohawk has got a great deal of long words which are very cumbersome when you try and say them in an English fashion. De waganun warawaria, de gagakwandunde yonangistunde, jit karakwenagans, kawenda dakwa. What de wagadon wanjose. These are all a lot easier to say once you stop trying to pronounce them in an English fashion. There's sort of a self-reinforcing cycle in that the way that you hold your mouth makes it easy for you to say these long, slightly cumbersome words, but it also necessitates these longer, slightly cumbersome words because you've got fewer phonemes to work with. This sort of limited number of phonemes can lead to a problem for language learners where a lot of words kind of sound similar to each other unless you're very familiar with them, or unless you pronounce them very sharply. Gadaweata, I enter somewhere, sounds a bit like gadeweandos, I put something away. They aren't that similar once you're familiar with the words, but if you're just learning them and you don't know either of them very well, it's easy to get them confused. I think this would be a very good language for puns if people were experienced speakers. There aren't a ton of experienced speakers at the moment. I think the language is in a semi-healthy state up in the northern communities. I think Akwesasne or Ganawage, it's like 1 in 10, 1 in 20, somewhere between them. Down here on Six Nations, it's only like 200 or 300, all of them second language speakers. Our last first language speaker died like 5 years ago. The last first language speaker in my family died 20 years ago. The Mohawk Institute Residential School just outside of Brantford, the Mush Hole, it was the largest residential school in Canada, and it's right next to Six Nations, so we got hit big time by it. The way it went in my family is that my grandparents, first language speakers, they didn't teach my mom or her siblings anything because they thought it would paint a target on their backs. That's kind of the way it went for most people in Six Nations. Akwesasne Ganawage, because they started off as Christian communities, they didn't have the same relationship with residential schools that a lot of other communities did, so the language was able to survive up there a lot better. Anyway, let's get on with the lesson part of this. Mohawk language is what's called a polysynthetic language, which basically refers to the amount that you can do with compound words, the level of flexibility with compound words, the amount to which the language relies on compound words. Compound words are long words made up of little bits and pieces of other words. They often convey the same meaning as a sentence. An example in English would be something like circumnavigate. This word is made up of three parts, the circum, which is like circumference, around something, navi, which is like boats and water, and then ate, which makes it into a verb and denotes the tense. So circumnavigate, to sail around something, to go around something by water. Now in English, these sort of compound words aren't all that common. They're usually sort of academic or abstract or technical words, pretentious egghead type of words. There's also very little call to improvise new compound words on the fly in English. In Mohawk, compound words are everywhere, all over the place, and extremely common. There's also a great deal of flexibility with what you can do with them. For instance, we could take the sentence, she has black hair. In English, we say this with 4 separate words. Now, in Mohawk, we could structure that sentence very similarly to the way we do in English by saying, Yagoya onunquis nene kahunji. She has hair that is black. If we wanted to be a little bit more eloquent, we could combine some of those words to say agonuquis rahunji. This compound word uses a similar structure to most compound words in the language, so let's take it apart and sort of examine the structure. To begin with, we have the ago. This is a directional prefix indicating the direction of the verb. In this case, she possesses it. The second part is part of the noun onunquis, which is hair. The sera is a joiner. It doesn't mean anything on its own. You just put it in to connect certain types of words together. The final part, hunji, is part of the word gahunji, which means like dark or black. This is an example of how a fairly simple compound word functions in Mohawk. One of the big features of the Mohawk language is the use of directional prefixes, these sort of pronoun prefixes at the front of a word. These denote the direction of the action described in the verb. These come in the form of people to it, or it to people, or people to people, and they include basically every possible combination of those. There's over 70 different directional prefixes. They're an inescapable part of the language. Every verb, most adjectives, and even a fair few nouns have a directional prefix attached to them by default. One of the most important skills in speaking the Mohawk language is the ability to swap out these directional prefixes quickly and fluidly and correctly. For the final part of today's lesson, I'm going to give you a little experiment to do. On screen now are 3 verbs. Genhotunquas, I open it. Genohares, I clean it or wash it. Genunsquas, I steal it. And now here are the various conjugations of someone liking it. Try swapping out some of the highlighted prefixes and you'll be able to say some words that I haven't told you, which is, I think, a pretty cool feature of the language. Thank you for watching. I hope you found this interesting. I don't really know why I felt the need to make this, or if I will continue this into a series or something, but anyway. Onegiwahe. Already, eh?